think it's not so much that the education system is telling us about boys' underachievement. I think it's boys are telling us something about the underachievement of the education system. Yes, well, I'm talking about the National Writing Project, or Nate's Writing Project. What we have found with children in the classroom is that when they have a writing journal or a free writing book, and that they know that they're going to be allowed to write whatever they want, you do get some interesting responses to start off with, people testing out the limits of this authority which has been conferred on them. But in general, boys in particular value the opportunity to have a free writing space, and one which isn't going to be marked but is responded to, obviously. And often we found boys with, for example, anger management problems will declare things in the privacy of their own white space on paper that they would otherwise take action upon. So hitting the page rather than the person is something that's happened. And that actually Ofsted have endorsed some of the practices of using writing journals, partly for SMSC, the spiritual, moral dimensions of children's learning, cultural dimensions of children's learning, social dimensions of children's learning, as well as what it does for their personal personal health, really, personal mental health. So certainly writing has more to offer than simply a level 5. It's something which is more to do with the process that we've put the emphasis on the process more than the product. And in that way, very similar to the US National Writing Project, which has obviously been going for about 40 years, where they're finding similar things, that the children, when they're asked to focus on meaning rather than on structure, they find writing much more pleasant, and the conversations about writing are often very interesting. I mean, we have had examples where children have used maybe a lot of swear words in their journal, but that's an opportunity for talking about, well, why did you do that? What were you expecting to find? Because you knew I was going to come across that. Let's talk about that. Why? What is it that you're feeling? And it doesn't usually last more than once or twice. And similarly, there can be abuse of that. But another thing that has happened, which has been helpful, I think, to boys, has been using the virtual learning environment that most schools have and sharing online. Again, this has to be moderated, but I think because this is opened up to the children, the world of writing and all the difficulties that surround it, they are more likely to be willing participants in that journey. And I think that's why we've started in the Nate's Writing Project to focus on teachers' writing. And as I was saying earlier, the two first reactions in teachers' writing groups are, one, I don't know, I don't want to share this. There's one reaction, and yet then they reflect that in the classroom they're often asking children to share, and the children may not be ready to share, so there are implications there. And secondly, they say, I don't know how good this is. And again, they reflect that actually in their own classroom practice, they're constantly chivying children to up-level or do other such things with their work. So I think teachers are finding through the evidence that they're sharing online and sharing in the live workshops and writing groups that have met, that in fact these approaches are very effective, not only in raising standards, but also in making the children feel more included in the process. And they themselves, I think, as teachers, feel more comfortable, because there's no doubt that writing is very important to us as a culture, as a society. It's not going to go away, just in the same way as people say, well, actually it's all going to go digital. Well, there is a digital element, and of course children are writing an awful lot online. But there's also a space for quiet, reflective writing, which actually is valued by boys as much as by girls. And in fact, it's the boys who've been winners of things like the slam poetry competition that the Poetry Society have run. And we had a boy in Buckinghamshire, where I teach in Buckinghamshire, and a fantastic piece of writing, personal piece of writing, poetry, which he performed in front of an audience, and was, I think, nominated for the Slam Poetry Prize for the UK. So I think there are lots of ways in which an approach that focuses far more on process and rectifies the balance that seems to have swung over to structures, things like spelling, punctuation and grammar. We're now going to get tests in those. I think that's a shame, because I think it won't necessarily yield the best rise in standards that might come through other means. So it's not that we're against those things. We have to be careful that we don't get caricatured in that fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the worry, isn't it? That, you know, perhaps if you're allowing non-standard spellings and punctuations in writing and not marking it, then, you know, what's the Daily Mail going to say? I mean, and that's something teachers like me have to face, our senior management. Yes. What sort of advice would you give us to sort of try and get a project like that off the ground in a school?
Well, I think advice I would have to teachers is to join a writing group if you can, but if you can't join a writing group, to at least open a journal, buy yourself a book and start writing and start reflecting upon the day-to-day. It might be a diary that you keep, day-to-day events, and start writing some of the things that you're asking the children to write. And many teachers do that, of course, already. And then once you're doing that, to start to introduce that in the classroom. So introduce writing journals, which are free writing books that you give to the children. And you say, well, this is a book for you to write what you want to write in. And we'll have opportunities to do this regularly, and I'll look at them, but I'm not going to mark them. These are not going to be marked. These are places for you to explore your ideas, feelings, and so forth, and you're going to communicate those with whoever you like, but you don't have to share them with anybody. I need to see them, because obviously you may be writing things that you may want me to see, but don't write anything in here that you don't want me to see. You'll have to do that in a private journal, but this is what we do, and here's one I made earlier. So if you've been keeping a journal, you can show them. And I think children are very much valued when teachers have shared what they wanted to share and say, well, I've tried this too, and this is why I got stuck, and I found this difficult. And that changes the dynamic, changes the atmosphere in the classroom, that writing is something that we all do. It's important to us. It's hard. Sometimes even the best writers are silent and can't write. And that's the truth. It's not that one escalates up a little ladder of progression smoothly in the way that some people believe. And in fact, it's ostensibly proven that it isn't like that. And that's why the writing journals are very useful in terms of opening up the writing process, not only to children, but to teachers too. And I think having a writing journal and having those opportunities regularly leads to better discussion about what is effective and why one needs to have comma exactly in that place in order to get exactly that meaning across. So actually you can be more punctilious about punctuation when you have been through a process where you're fully engaged, because it matters to you very much how this comes across and why you would pause here and why you would intonate differently there, and how you could achieve that through some of the structures that are conventions. Same with spelling, same with grammar. You look at those things. It's not that we're not saying that these things all the things to do with structure doesn't matter. And many structures are very supportive, and children would learn through having little structures, like, you know, at first I thought this and now I think that. It's a useful structure to say, well, let's reflect upon these things a bit more. And there might be other structures, but I think they also need freedom, and I think at the moment, the system around the country, it doesn't bar freedom. In fact, it seems, on some cases, to encourage it. But actually, in practice, I think people are scared of exercising their own authority over their own lives. And I think they need to find that again, because I think it matters to us as a culture, as a nation, to hear everybody's voice, not just some of the voices in some of the ways that we find conventionally pleasing. I think we need to hear some of the things that and children are telling us an awful lot about education. And as I said earlier, I think it's not so much that the education system is telling us about boys' underachievement. I think it's boys are telling us something about the underachievement of the education system. So I think we need to think and we need to listen, and that's what we're doing.